I contend that the climate change theory is pseudoscience, essentially. It is not real science, it's not even a real scientific theory, and let alone being an empirically verifiable fact. Rather, it becomes more of a religion than science. And the term denier is really synonymous with the term heretic. So anybody that dares to question the dominant paradigm, known as climate change, is a heretic, because they dare to question that religious dogma. Well, so some may counter, oh no, it's science. Of course, it's science. So then I would counter them and then ask them, well, isn't science supposed to be something that is falsifiable by the Popperian method of falsifiability? So that, because anything you can always find confirmations for any given theory, even conflicting theories. That's the problem with confirmations. You can always, if you start to believe in any given theory and become an advocate for it, and develop a attachment or identification with a theory that you'd invested yourself emotionally to, then wherever you look, then there's a confirmation, and that you could easily find support for your position wherever you look. But the problem is someone else who has a theory that is mutually exclusive to yours. They can also find confirmations everywhere. They'll do the same thing. Oh, there's a confirmation. There's a confirmation, and so it's that's so you need, the only way to have a genuine progress in scientific in knowledge about the natural world is to instead try to look for refutations, falsifications for your theory. And so I think that's where the climate change theory fails, is there's no clear way where it's shown that you can refute the theory. How do we know it's false? I mean, how could we know it's false? How can it be refuted? And instead all there is this stacking of the deck, confirmation bias, just looking for confirmations for the theory, such as, hey, there's a bad hurricane. Oh, that's climate change. And even when it's extra cold, it's been fairly cold this late fall and early winter here in Minnesota. It's plenty of snow on the ground. It's cold outside. Why can't that be a refutation of the climate change theory? Now, it used to be called the global warming theory. Now, since there's been all these cold stretches since the climate change theory, or the global warming theory, whatever you want to call it, has become popular, we've had quite a few very cold winters here in Minnesota and around the world. And so it becomes kind of obvious that, well, wouldn't that be a falsification of the theory of global warming? And so I think it's become essentially an evasion tactic by the proponents of this anthropogenic climate change theory proponents to change the name of it to just climate change, the climate change theory. They made it so vague that there's no way to obviously refute it. So instead we say, well, they'll point to some weather event and say, oh yeah, the climate change is going to result in more frequent and more severe storms. But but they don't define, well, how much, how do you define severe storms? How are you could say when there's been more of them and they're more severe, happening with increased frequency? Well, how do you define that exactly? Because there's been plenty of, before the climate change theory, there's been plenty of severe storms that have happened, very severe, devastating hurricanes and severe thunderstorms and severe winters and so on. And so how are you comparing the present to the past? And how can you refute the claims that there are more of them and they're more severe? What exactly is being how can that be refuted? How can that be falsified? That's not. It's instead they do go this really vague route where no matter what happens, they'll just use confirmation bias and say, "Oh, there! Look at this extreme storm. That must be climate change. Yeah, that's confirmation, not the confirmation." And so, and anybody that questions that is labeled a heretic. But instead of heretic, they use the word denier, which is an absurd term in the context of climate change, in the context of science, because in the sense that it's being used, denier, that would indicate that would be somebody who is not acknowledging an empirically verifiable prima facie evident fact, such as, say for instance, you look out and observe there's a duck outside, and say, well, someone would say, oh, there's a duck out there, and then the other person says, oh, there's no duck out there. I don't see any duck. That person would be a denier. They are denying a prima facie evident, empirically verifiable fact. But the climate change does not refer to a individual prima facie evident empirical fact. Instead, it refers to a theory. And theories are not something that can be, as a whole, cannot be empirically verified to exist. That is because a theory requires a belief in a causal chain of events to occur to reach the the theory to be true, such that, for instance, in terms of climate change, the belief is that carbon dioxide, human-created carbon dioxide, is causing certain changes in the climate over time. Now, so this CO2, carbon dioxide, is causing something. So causation, though, however, is never an empirically verifiable thing in itself. I mean, causality is not empirically verifiable as a thing in itself. All you have is one. With causation, all you have is one event, and then in time is closely related to something else happening. Then that happens reliably time after time. For instance, you look at the example of, say, pool balls on a pool table, and you'll see one will hit the other, and you'll at a certain angle, and then the other one will roll in response at a certain velocity based on the velocity of the pool ball that hit it. But you say, well, the other one pool ball caused the other one to roll. But there's the causation, though, as a thing in itself, you don't observe that. You don't hear it. You can hear the sound of the pool balls, and you see them rolling in quick succession, and you hear the sound when at the time that they hit each other. But that's all you have. And then you just see all you see is, and here is a reliable series of events that are empirically verifiable, but the causation as a thing in itself, you don't hear it, you don't see it, you don't feel it. All you have is certain things happening in a series of events in time, reliably happening one after the other, and then you have a conclusion in your mind pretty much automatically. You just make an assumption that, without even trying to, that yes, there's a thing we refer to as causation that is happening there, but you don't sense it you can't sense it with your physical senses, the causation. And so that's why in a theory is a belief that you cannot rely on your senses to verify its existence. And so that's the case with, say, climate change or any other theory, whether it's like the theory of evolution. At least with the theory of evolution, it's built into that term. You have the theory of evolution. And you don't hear about, for those that doubt the theory of evolution, that question it, you never hear them referred to as evolution deniers. And because it doesn't make any sense to refer to somebody who denies, who doubts the theory of evolution. You don't hear them referred to as a denier. You hear they might be ridiculed, but they're not called a denier, because it does not make any sense to call somebody that questions a theory to be a denier. But that's what is done with the theory of climate change, even though it's obviously a theory. It doesn't make any sense, though, to refer to somebody that questions climate change and who doubts it or doesn't believe that it exists. You don't hear, but you do hear them referred to as being a denier. What are they supposed to be denying in terms of something that's empirically verifiable? And so, especially with in the case of something as complex as the climate, over time, over such a long period of time, referring to them as deniers, it seems to me to be just absurd. Anybody that questions, just dares to question the theory of climate change. That's why I think it's more like anybody that's a denier is really just being accused of being a heretic to the religion of climate change. And yes, I'm a heretic in that sense. Sure, it's supposed to be scientific. It's not supposed to be a religion. So why are the people being effectively called heretics for daring to question a theory of something that's very complex? Now they'll compare it with something like peak oil. Peak oil theory, remember that? When was that? Like the early aughts, early 2000s, when there was such a hysteria over that. And I believed it. I thought, oh, we're in trouble by long before now. It's like, I think like 2012 or 2015, we're supposed to get to the point where it would require more energy to get oil out of the ground than we would get out of the ground. So that would be because it was so difficult to get at. By that time we would have exhausted the easily accessible oil. So we'd have to dig so deep into the ground that would require more energy to pump the oil out than the energy contained in that oil that we got out. And so would not make any economic or even physical sense to go to the trouble of pumping the oil out by now. So we would have this. We'd be in a civil emergency by now, because we wouldn't have any oil, basically, because we would have exhausted the easily accessible oil, and so it'd be extremely difficult. So difficult to get the oil out, would not make any sense to try to pump it out by now. But instead, what we have OPEC that are limiting today, 2022 and almost 2023. We have OPEC limiting the supply of oil so that they can try to keep the price up. We have so much oil. So the climate change theory has been totally falsified. But do we have anybody that was building up the peak oil hysteria back in the early to mid-aughts, when they were building up that hysteria? Where are they now? Why aren't they admitting, I guess we were wrong? Why can't they say, well, if we were wrong about that, maybe we're also wrong about the climate change theory? If we go back to the early aughts, probably people would have been accused of being deniers if they doubted the peak oil theory. But now, anybody that dares to question the climate change theory, they're accused of being deniers, even though it's so vague about the predictions of climate change. It's pretty vague. Peak oil, the predictions are fairly vague, but at least they're specific enough that we can now say that theory has been completely debunked and falsified. However, with climate change, I don't know how would we refute that. How is climate change theory possibly falsifiable? How can we say that it's not true? At what point? At what year? What weather events could we say that it's false? But that's not what's happening. They're not these proponents of the climate change theory. They're not providing that. That's the problem, and that's what Karl Popper, I think would call climate change theory pseudoscience, because it's not falsifiable, and that's what you need to determine whether it's real science, whether a theory is real science or not. Because you can't falsify climate change, it's not real science. It's pseudoscience. It should be completely abandoned until they can come up with a way that it can be falsified. That's my premise. So, yeah, if anybody's watching this, and I'd like to hear in the comment sections if anybody thinks let me know, how can climate change be falsified? According to what someone like Karl Popper would say, that this is falsifiable, and that therefore real science. But I'd be very interested in any comments along the lines. I'd welcome any. So that's what I wanted to present. So I'd like to know how is climate change a real scientific theory if it can't be falsified? That's what I'd like to know. So let me know in the comment section. I'd like to hear any ideas. And so if you're still watching, thanks for watching.